Let me just, before I call up Tate, let you know there's some people in the room that I think we should introduce and let them at least wave their hands. Jill Rich, is Jill here? From the DG's office? Okay, she'll be here. Sally Barnes, I know she's here. Sally Barnes, CEO of Environment. Robin Vinson and Sarah Hill. Is Sarah Hill here? Okay. Applying Infrastructure. Is Steve here? I didn't see Steve yet. Okay. I didn't see Julian from Urban Growth yet, nor David. Robin Mellon. Is Robin here? Denise Anderson. Denise Anderson. Okay. Some others will be coming along, but we do have to move along. So I think I'd like our host, Ryan Tate, to have the first words. Thank you, Ryan, from Trade and Investment.
Thank you, Ed. So I'm here just to represent the Department of New South Wales Trade and Investment and say a big thank you to Ed, Sandy, the USSS team, and all the delegates. Thank you very much for participating in the program and all the time and effort that was put into it. Now, from New South Wales Trade and Investment's perspective, we see a lot of good opportunities arising from this program that support our main agenda, and that is to support trade and investment within the state, support local companies, and to encourage further development in the sustainability space, which I'm sure you all got to learn a lot about on your trip and look at new opportunities with all of your projects. Now, we in particular are taking a very strong interest in the program of monitoring it and also following up with the delegates and how the program will impact your development and sort of the trade and investment or job outcomes or capital expenditure outcomes that are a result of your learnings. So we'll be in touch and would also encourage you to spread the word, as I'd like to announce that New South Wales the New South Wales government will be continuing support for this program into 2014. So this will continue. And not only will we be supporting this program, but another one called the World City Summit, which will be showcasing Sydney to the world at one of the major conferences in Singapore. So we're very grateful for the support that we have from the USSC to encourage and promote innovative programs within New South Wales and to support New South Wales companies and projects. So that's all from me. I hope you enjoy today, and please stay in touch. Like we said, not only will the USSC be directly involved with you, the New South Wales Department of Trade and Investment will also be following up and wanting to learn more about your individual projects and where the department as a whole can also contribute to your continued success. Thank you very much.
I think it's time to eat. So take your first morsels. While you're eating, the way the program has to work, we're going to have some presentations. So please get started because right after your entree, we'll have our first presentations and mingle. And I'm delighted to hear that this is a continuing program. And if any of you have any trouble filling out your evaluation, just send it to me or Sandy. We'd be more than happy to assist you with that. We would like to announce that the Future Cities program has legs now, and 5 of the cities who've gone on the trip have indicated they will be working with us. 3 are already actively working with us, and others will be working with us to continue our work so that all the stuff that we brought back, Tate, the ideas and so forth, are implemented back home and the connections are maintained with the U.S. and with other firms. Sally and I were talking about U.S. firms' involvement in sustainable development here and the cross-fertilization we're getting from that. Parramatta has had U.S. placemaker out. So it's really beginning to happen, that cross-fertilization, all the kinds of things you want. But let me fertilize your stomachs first, and then we'll get into some knowledge fertilization with you hearing from the mayors. All right. What we're going to do is have Mayor Sally Betts make the presentation. We will not have Q&A after the presentations. We'll have the Q. We're going to break the presentations up into two lots. So after the first three presentations, we'll have a little Q&A. And then after the second three, and then the mayors who are here and myself will have a little panel, mayor and vice mayors, will have a little panel at the end kind of summarizing what we think our learnings were. And we'll go back out in the audience for the GMs and others who went on the trip to get their observations about what went on. And all this is being taped and filmed, and this is going to be part of what Tate mentioned earlier, the kind of assessment of this experience. So it's helpful to us, and we want to gather it all. The other thing, as I just mentioned, the Future Cities program has just kicked off, and many of the projects you're going to be talking about are incorporated in the Future Cities program. So the movement from where we started in the workshop to the study tour to the projects on the ground, I think are really, really very important, and we'll be commenting on that entire process. For people who don't know how this worked, in January or February last year, we put out a call. We received some funding from Trade and Investment, 2 cities around New South Wales to participate in this program. They had to submit a location in their city, a precinct, that had some sustainability issues. It had to be a physical location, and it had to be subject to some urban environmental change requirements. And they would submit that project. We examined it. We selected, I think, 12 or so for further examination. Rod Simpson, my colleague here, and myself and Bruce Taper, we assessed these programs to make sure we had a good mix, and a strong mix, and a quality set of programs. And then we invited people to come to the workshop. We thought we were going to have 8 cities come to work from. Thank God 2 dropped out. The workshop was super intense, to say the least, but we really got a lot out of it. And then after the workshop, keeping in mind what we had learned, the directions we were taking, because the workshop was about how do we go about solving this problem, using expertise from architects, designers, economic development specialists, transportation specialists. So we got really a good mix of people focusing on the program. And then some outside people who could talk about how we could advance this to the next stage. So this is what we might call a semi-finished product when we went overseas. After the trip overseas, we asked each of the communities to kind of pull this into the project, the strategic direction they were going to go in, and present it here. Little did I know that I'd be helping some of these communities, and now 5 out of the 6, take these next steps, not just in the presentation here, but in the implementation. So what you hear from the mayors or vice mayors or city manager, depending on who it is, where we are in that next to last step, how we're going to take the steps to implementing a change in the community. So, Sally, I don't want to put any weight on your shoulders, but you are number 1.
Thank you, Ed, and ladies and gentlemen, and I think Ed's punishing me because I was not able to go on the trip to America, but I was very confident and ably represented by Emily Scott, our environmental manager. So thank you very much, especially for choosing us to be one of the teams to be part of this program. I know that a few of you may have heard the word Bondi Junction before, but bear with me. Just a little bit about Bondi Junction. We're located 6 kilometres east of the Sydney CBD, and it's the only major urban centre that services the eastern sub-region of Sydney, including Randwick, Wallara, Waverley, and of course Botany. We have an interesting mix of residential, retail, and strata office space. We have 50% of all the commercially zoned land in the whole of the Waverley LGA, which of course I should tell you is only 9.2 square kilometres, because we are the most densely populated area in the whole of Australia. The Waverley LEP 2012 allows us for an additional 60,000 square metres of retail floor space, about 40,000 square metres of commercial floor space, and we're looking at an additional about 579 residential homes that can be built in Bondi Junction. Our recent urban design review has in fact pointed out to us that we could have more development potential than our existing LEP. According to the Metropolitan Strategy 2036, Bondi Junction can in fact expect a 12% growth in population and a 30% growth in employment. You know, we're located in the city, the centre of the eastern suburbs. We're between the city and the iconic Bondi Beach, so we are really well positioned to capture and capitalise on the 2 million visitors that pass through our area every year. We're situated along the ridge with 360 degrees views from a range of seeing the aircraft to seeing whales to seeing the ships in the harbour, and I think Ed acknowledges our view is probably a little bit better than this. Of course, we are home to Westfield's global flagship shopping centre that has 58,000 visitors a day. We're also the only home to Williams-Sonoma, which is an American shop, a wonderfully well-known shop that chose Bondi Junction as the only place outside North America to situate their new stores, 4 of them. I need to say, because we have Lara amongst other people here, we're the home of the Roosters. But our community is committed to active travel. But the Bondi Junction bus rail interchange services 39,000 passengers every day. We are the 8th busiest interchange in Australia. We are the home to Australia's most profitable bus route, the 333. Can you imagine a bus service making a profit? Ours does. And that's over 7 million passengers each day that travel on that service. Oxford Street, Bondi Junction, in fact, is the 9th busiest bike route. And our lunchtime pedestrian counts in Oxford Street are in fact comparable with George Street in the city. So we have some challenges that we needed to address. We've got pockets of high pedestrian activity, but lots and lots of vehicles. The streets are full of moving and parked cars, overpass infrastructure, turning lanes, loading zones, and we have this great conflict between cars and pedestrians. We have a high volume of through traffic, so if you want to go from Randwick to Wallara, you'll end up going through the middle of Bondi Junction. Despite our public transport-minded community, which we do have, 49% of our workers in Bondi Junction actually drive there. So we know there's some great opportunities for revitalisation and growth in the centre, but we also know that as this grows and if we take up our development potential, our greenhouse gas emissions will increase. And we know with the existing LEP, if that was fulfilled, our emissions would increase by 31%. So this would work against our environmental targets, which I think that we are pretty unique in some of the councils, because we have targeted a 30% reduction in our existing greenhouse emissions. So we know we really have to be smart about any new development that we have. So our Bondi Junction 2030, we may change the date, but anyway, it sounds cute, what it's about. We actually want to be Bondi Junction to be the premier urban centre in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. We want it to be a vibrant and sustainable urban precinct where people want to come, not just have to come, to go through it to catch a bus or a train. We want it to be a centre of design excellence for both the public and the private domain. But we also want to make the most of our development potential to ensure that our residents get the maximum benefit out of this centre development. We want to showcase leading sustainable infrastructure, including low carbon technology, distributed energy and water infrastructure, and automated waste collection. So we want to get more people into public transport, out of their cars, and somehow resolve the congestion that we have in the centre. So why the United States Centre project? Yeah, we've been doing significant work on trying to solve these problems. We've developed a Bondi Junction Complete Streets framework to achieve a holistic approach to traffic and public domain planning that will ensure that Bondi Junction streets are designed for everyone. We've completed our urban design review to actually identify strategic development opportunities. And of course, thank you, Bruce, we partnered with Kinesis to test the viability of a distributed energy and water system throughout the precinct. But we had no overarching strategy that pulled all these individual projects together like a great jigsaw puzzle. We had not addressed the missing pieces of the puzzle in terms of the economic development of the centre, strategic positioning of Bondi Junction in the eastern suburbs, and the potential for future development in the centre and forming some strategic alliances. And we also had a lot of questions of how to develop and deliver sustainable infrastructure throughout the centre and what the potential for us, understanding that, of course, we partnered in the project with the other biggest landowner in Bondi Junction, which, of course, is Westfield. So this program provided a catalyst to get myself and my senior staff and our key strategic partner, Westfield, along with the technical experts from overseas and within Australia, within a room to discuss what future strategic opportunities exist in Bondi Junction and to develop strategies to make it happen. So the US study tour, after we had developed these opportunities, was an opportunity to how to go about implementing these, as well as to learn from the successes and mistakes of some of the leading cities throughout the US. In the case of Waverley, it certainly provided a fantastic professional opportunity for Emily to travel abroad and come back with some new ideas. So, and to top it all, we've actually had some wins already. We've drafted a strategy for Bondi Junction 2030 to address the future growth, economic development, urban design, excellence, sustainability infrastructure, marketing, communications, and governance of the centre. We've commenced the development of a distributed energy and water infrastructure plan for the centre. We've started working, it's very exciting, on an automated waste collection system so that we would get rid of all the garbage trucks in the whole of Bondi Junction and suck all our garbage underground and distribute it straight out. And so it would be absolutely amazing that we could have a centre with no garbage trucks and just suck all our garbage down. We've endorsed our draft Complete Streets program and our Waverley Bike Plan, both of which are now on public exhibition. We've just engaged a marketing firm called Surveillance to help Council and our senior staff articulate our vision for Bondi Junction. identify our key strategic partners, and draft a marketing strategy that will help us sell our vision. In fact, we had our first meeting with Surveillance last night to try and make sure that we have this vision and that we in fact market it, especially to our residents, in a proper way. We have commenced discussions with Transport New South Wales about the future potential for light rail to connect the precinct with the beach. And of course, we've started to working together to our short and medium term options to reduce our congestion that we have. We're going to establish a Bondi Junction advisory group with representatives from all our key stakeholders to ensure that we do stay on track with our vision. But of course, there's a lot more to do. So we know we can't do this alone. And there's some integral partners that we need to engage, including, obviously, the Property Council, Green Council, the Green Building Council, Transport for New South Wales, Department of Planning and Infrastructure, just to name a few. And we need ongoing help. We need professional relationships and great collaboration that this program has offered and hopefully will continue to offer. We've also experienced the value of regional cooperation through the Sydney metropolitan area, working closely with cities facing similar problems and sharing our experiences. You know, if Sydney is really going to remain a global city, we need more of this cross-LGA boundary collaboration to resolve the regional environmental problems our cities are all facing. And for this reason, you know, we are really looking forward to continuing our relationship and our affiliation with the United States Study Centre and look forward to the next stages of this project. So thank you so much for allowing us to be part of this. It has been of great benefit to Waverley. We genuinely believe that when our vision is realised, not if, when our vision is realised, Bondi Junction will be a city that everybody will look at as an example of the best sustainable city that there is in Australia. Thank you.
So, continuing, Blacktown. Rudy Savick.
Thank you, Ed. Firstly, I'd just like to put an apology in for our Mayor, who is disappointed he couldn't make today. He's got another important appointment to attend to and was on the tour and was very supportive of the tour and wished everyone well. Just firstly, just a snapshot of Blacktown. We're the 5th largest local government area in Australia and the largest in New South Wales. We have a budget of $378 million and 1 in 72 Australians live in Blacktown, so a reasonable sized area. The population currently is around 320,000 people, but we're one of the growth centres that state government have targeted, and we're looking to grow to about 500,000 people in 2036. As part of that, we're also targeting to increase our jobs from 96,000 to 183,000 jobs. We have 3,000 hectares of employment area to fill, and our dwellings, we're approximately 100,000 dwellings at the moment to increase to about 180,000, 190,000 dwellings. So the challenge is there for us. Council had in 2012 identified some urban precincts that they wanted to renew, and have supported that with some studies to bring the transport and land use integration together in those areas. Blacktown City Centre is one of those urban precincts that we're looking at renewing, and one of the sites was of particular interest was it's called the Warwick Lane site, which sits within the eastern end of the Blacktown City Centre and was the subject of our tour to see how we could find challenges and strategies to get that development off the ground. So the site is about 23,000 square metres and has potential for about 100,000 square metres of gross leasable floor area. It's currently an open grade car park and is a problem for our area in that we have a very heavy anchor at one end in West Point, which is at the western end of the city centre. It's a shopping centre of about 105,000 square metres of gross leasable floor area. So it's dragging the population towards that end, and the strip between the western and eastern end is suffering. So Council is committed to trying to drive some development at the eastern end to create another anchor to provide that connectivity between the two areas. So the challenges for us are to redevelop that site and to re-energise the CBD and provide some vitality in it with a mix potentially of office, commercial and residential, so we can create activity at different parts of the day. Our northern and southern parts of the CBD are separated by the main Western Railway line, and we're looking at creating some pedestrian linkages across there to make connections more easier through the CBD. We've done a lot of work on improving walking and cycling through the CBD, but there's still some connections that are missing that this type of development can complete for us. It is located at the access intersection of two major state roads, so access to those to this area is going to be a little difficult. We need to work with transport agencies in order to develop those access provisions. We want to take advantage of the site in that we're located right on Blacktown Station. It's the 12th busiest railway station in the Sydney Trains network, so we need to plan to how to have easy access to that station, remove the need for people to travel by car, and promote the public transport access. We really want to learn from our previous attempts to develop this site, which hadn't achieved success because of the way they were packaged and probably weren't presented in an attractive package that developers would be interested in at that time. Obviously market forces will drive that to some extent, but we think we can do that better. And we need to create a retail edge to the development and create that vitality along the Main Street frontage. So that drove us to be involved in this project, and through the study tour we identified some findings that were going to help us through the process. One of the keys that we learnt was that we need to master plan this project ready for delivery. So we need to get people on board that can help us create a master plan that's going to be attractive to investors and developers, and bring in some affordable staging options that we can logically develop the site, create that anchor that we need, and create that vitality and bring out a bit more prosperity to the rest of the main shopping strip. We need to develop or identify project partners. Most of the locations we went to in the States, there were project partners that were prominent in helping each other get projects off the ground. So we're looking at partners such as the Blacktown Hospital, which is very close nearby, UWS University, and larger retail centres. There was also a high emphasis on community ownership through the study tour projects that we inspected. So we need to engage the community and get them on board and take them with us through this process. The other important aspect was to de-risk the project as much as possible. A lot of the project partners that we met and spoke to, they were able to, whether it was through government grants or through other finance packages, were able to de-risk the site by providing servicing, providing underground car parks, and providing the facilities needed to get the project kick-started. So we'll be looking at how can we de-risk the site. We've already started looking at that process. The ability to create public and private partnerships to help us through it. Council is committed to the project, but Council has limited resources financially to put towards some of those developments. But we can create a drive through the structure of whether we move a civic centre to that particular location to kickstart the process. The importance of creating an attractive environment and public domain was very prominent in the locations that were selected in the States. Portland and City of Boulder and those areas were quite attractive places and made you want to go to those spaces, and so that's an important issue. And renewable energy options. If we can make the site have a renewable energy options that make it cheaper for and more attractive for developers to go there, council can use that as part of the de-risking process of the site. So that's what we've picked up from the study tour, and how do we put that into some sort of strategy that we're going to move forward with. We've engaged Urban Growth to take us through the first couple of stages of this project, and we're looking to obviously engage the Sustainable Cities program as part of that process. We have a workshop arranged, and Ed will be on that team to help us through that process. We started looking at options to consolidate the site so that we can design a strategy that is not limited by one building or two buildings that are just located in strategic positions. In terms of de-risking the site, we've already looked at how we can make it more attractive for developers by providing the parking requirement for the site without having to include that as part of the development cost. How we can utilise, with the utilities and servicing, how we can relocate them, so that once again removes some development costs. And looked at what options we can for identifying whether it's a council building, whether it's a hospital precinct, whether it's a university that would be one of the anchors to the site. So we're moving forward with that process. We hope to have some things, we'll have the workshop completed and a strategy identified before the end of this year, and council is very committed to getting this site off the ground. So you can see from what we've learnt through the study tour that we're trying to put that in place, and the study tour was very valuable in identifying locations for us that had similar problems that they'd been through, and had some light at the end of the tunnel that they found, and are now prosperous in those cities. So we're looking to achieve the same sort of aims. So we thank Ed and his team for identifying and showing us those particular locations. That gives us some hope and commitment too. So we know the Blacktown Council is the biggest, and through this process we want to make sure we're the best. So thank you very much.
Jill, you weren't here, but thank you for coming. I announced people from government who'd be here, and thank you very much for coming. We're going to have one more before the main meal is served. This is going to become a familiar theme: strategy, partners, getting the development with the partners and not coming up with the development before the partners is a very familiar theme. But when you're a teacher, you tell the students what you want them to know, you teach them, and then you tell them what they should know. So we're going through that process, and it's good to hear it coming back at us. So we're now going to hear from Liverpool, and I think they are well on the way toward their strategy. And then after the main, we'll start with Parramatta to make sure we got everybody's attention. So, Liverpool.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks very much, Ed, and everybody from the US Study Centre. Welcome, mayors and councillors and officers, government officials. It's good to hear that New South Wales Trade and Investment are taking an interest and supporting this program. From my point of view, all I can say is watch this space. Certainly our council is very enthused from the councillors and senior officers down as to what we can achieve, and as Professor Blakely correctly pointed out, we have taken to revitalising our city in a very active and progressive way. Just some background in terms of Liverpool City Council. It's a diverse and vibrant city, some 25 kilometres from east to west, 25 kilometres southwest of Sydney. Liverpool City Centre was designed in the 19th century under the stewardship of Governor Macquarie. It contains one of the few examples of the Hoddle Street grid, with the wide roads running north, south, east, west, connected with some discrete intimate laneways. Liverpool is a place of enormous potential. It has been identified by the New South Wales Government in its draft metropolitan strategy. It's a third regional city in Sydney and the gateway to Sydney's southwest. Liverpool City Centre has already the largest concentration of commercial and administrative activity in the southwest region. However, new development is required in order for the city to reach its full potential. It is home to some 13,600 businesses, 97% of which are small to medium-sized businesses. Our population in the order of 190,000 is set to double to something like 325,000 people by 2036, obviously providing a heavy strain and load on the existing infrastructure that we currently have, and also obviously the driver for an enormous number of new jobs that have to be created over that period. According to the New South Wales Department of Planning and Infrastructure projections, 35,000 new jobs across Liverpool are required just to keep pace with population growth over the next 20 years. 9,000 are required in the CBD alone by 2031. With this growth presents challenges. The population growth in southwest Sydney also represents a major business opportunity for business like Costco and Masters, which have already responded. Liverpool's strategic location at the junction of the M5, the M7 and the Hume Highway provides a strong rationale for future business investment. In terms of the specific city revitalisation strategy that Council is embarking on, it's a key priority of Council, and we are committed for Liverpool, as I said earlier, reaching its full potential as a regional city of the southwest Sydney. Council is currently developing a plan to make Liverpool a well-integrated and thriving city. We aim to encourage residents, workers and visitors to maximise our city during the day, in the evening, on weekends and at all times. Council has established a Liverpool City Centre Revitalisation Committee to drive the urban renewal. We are delighted that Professor Blakely is on that committee as an honorary member, and that committee meets regularly now to keep this process driving and progressive with implementation. 5 key projects have been identified for Council to focus on with the City Revitalisation Program. The first one centres around the Health Education and Medical Research Precinct, which houses one of the busiest and most prestigious hospitals in Australia along Elizabeth Street and connects the Big Park and wraps around a major bus and train interchange. The hospital is celebrating its 200th anniversary this year, so it's a unique opportunity to celebrate old and new. Secondly, there's the Eat Street, starting to take shape in the southern end of the city centre along Macquarie Street. Macquarie Mall, which runs as a pedestrian mall from Elizabeth Street through to Moore Street, offering a wide variety of retail offerings and which connects to the unique range of multiculturalism, fashion, jewellery, food and other stores, is the third major project that we're looking at. Fourthly, linkages to the Georges River to take advantage of the active and passive recreation opportunities along the Georges River corridor. And finally, development of our gateways in Liverpool to ensure a sense of arrival to the regional city and a place in the southwest of Sydney. How did the US study tour and the program affect our thinking? How has it helped us? Well, the Council was appointed in September last year and made economic development and the need for jobs one of the top priorities of the Council. We want to be a location where business feel welcome and they experience red carpet, not red tape. We are looking very, very hard at our planning and delivery process to make sure that investors, financiers, customers want to come to Liverpool and they get the red carpet treatment. Things are processed as quickly and efficiently as we can possibly make them. The revitalisation of our city centre will demonstrate to business, investors and the broader community that we are serious about what we're doing. The look and feel of the place reflects its attitude. if we are recognised as a progressive and proactive location, then we need to walk the talk. We were delighted to win the place on the US Study Centre, as Professor Blakey indicated. It came at the right time for us, and it has affected and shaped our thinking and has broadened our perspective and enhanced our the potential of what our city can provide. Some of our key takeouts from the US Study Tour include the importance of management of malls and public places, a customer service mentality of cleanliness and a statement about the place. We're looking to make our mall mean something so that it says it is Liverpool. It is welcoming, it is energetic, and both day and night. And that means bringing events, improving the streetscape, the landscape, making it clean, having a proper good mix of residential, commercial development. Whatever it takes, we've got to make that more work. Planning regulations that work with commercial imperatives rather than go against them. One of the things that I noticed when we were in America doing the tour, it's not a framework that here's what you have to do, what you need to do if you want to come in and develop in our city or move to our city. It's a matter of what does the market need, what do you want from us, and we will make sure we deliver what you need to come to our city. That we will give you what you need to want to live, work and play in our city. The walkability of the place is important as well. Many sites in America, we saw that people they walked very close to their homes, or they walked very close to public transport. Everything that they needed was basically at their fingertips. Excellent examples of mixed development, excellent examples of high density development. Beautiful laneways, parkland, shared space, very effectively put together. The unique qualities of successful cities are reflected in theming that captures a sense of place. Excellence in sustainability practice can provide a point of difference for location and underline that it is a modern creative space to be. And we've heard from previous speaker how important that is. And many examples in America too of how they're recycling and working, not only developing, but developing in conjunction with the environment and being environmentally friendly. So how are we translating these lessons into actions as we look at what we can do for Liverpool? Council is currently in the process of seeking quotes from a selected panel of expertise to propose urban designs for the key 5 strategic areas that I previously mentioned: the hospital precinct, the gateways, the Macquarie Mall, the southern end, Eat Street, and linkages to the Georges River. A city centre revitalisation committee of council has been established, and to drive these initiatives and to keep that focus but from both the councillors and from the senior officers down. Council has recalibrated its corporate sponsorship and events program and now prioritise activation of the city centre. One of the very, very successful events, Starry Surrey Night, we had on the 31st of August, attracted over 3,000 people to that event, and even today you're still reading articles about how successful it was. Council has concentrated its clean-up efforts to reflect the city revitalisation priorities, and I take note that in a number of the malls that we saw, they actually had a mall manager. I mean, that person was there to make sure that anything that needed to be done was done very quickly. A traffic study is being undertaken that will assist to ensure parking and traffic flow is aligned with precinct development plans. Planning controls are being reviewed and discussed with the Department of Planning and Infrastructure to reinforce council priorities for the city centre strategy. And we're working very closely with the department to realign our LEP with the CEP to try and provide a lot more comply and develop. So again, to bypass the detailed planning regime and also to speed up and to refocus that planning time on the more complex developments that are higher risk. Council's Town Improvement Fund has been raised through a special levy, has been quarantined to ensure alignment of these capital works with precinct development priorities. So there is a dedicated funding source as well as any others that we can find. Council has also recently approved a tender for CCTV and Wi-Fi. The intention is to have CCTV cameras in the city centre by the end of this year, calendar year, and early next year have free Wi-Fi in the whole of the CBD. This will reinforce Council's reputation for being a young, connected technologically savvy community. Building on and reinforcing sustainability as a strength of Liverpool as a location, our recycling rates exceed best practice in the United States by a considerable margin. I'm pleased to say that Council has been identified as the top performing Sydney Metropolitan Council in recycling in both 2009-10 and 2010-11. This has been explicitly recognised by way of funding from the New South Wales Environment Protection Authority towards the cost of Community Recycling Centre at Council's Operations Centre at our depot in Rose Street. The centre is intended to be used as a model for the EPA to demonstrate the benefits of such a facility. So finally, how can the New South Wales Government assist in our efforts? Well, through government decisions about new infrastructure and services, reflecting and demonstrating the strong alignment between Liverpool's objectives through its community strategic plan and the government's metropolitan strategy. By working with Liverpool City Council to relocate relevant government departments and sectors to Liverpool and providing a pre-commitment to office space for these activities as a catalyst to new commercial development in Liverpool. By assisting Council's efforts to realign its planning instruments to reflect its status as a regional city and encourage viable commercial development. Through reviewing road and rail transport corridors in and out of Liverpool to help and ease the traffic congestion. By assisting Council's efforts to attract new private sector investment, and we talked about partnership, to address some 70% of people who are in Liverpool have to leave Liverpool to go to their workplace. This is something that has to be stopped, has to be reversed. By investing further in services and health infrastructure at Liverpool Hospital, given the strength of the health and allied services industry and the sector in the Liverpool city centre. And to conclude, Liverpool is a place of unsurpassed opportunity. We are ambitious and fulfilling our potential. We are committed. The city centre is a commercial and community hub for the southwest Sydney, and we have plans to make sure it reflects that status. We are serious about the revitalisation plans that we are embarking on and meeting with New South Wales Government objectives of Liverpool as a regional city for jobs to be created closer to home. And we are keen to work with the New South Wales Government to meet our objectives and make sure that they are realised. Finally, I'd just like again to thank Professor Blakely, the US study tour, and everybody here. This is a fantastic exercise, one where knowledge can be shared and the ideas can spur and encourage a council to really think outside the square and become best practice, not only in local government, but in Australia. Thank you very much.
Rod, you want to come up here and join me? Please start eating. And if you have, I just like to get a couple of comments from Rod. Liverpool and Parramatta are sitting right next to. We have to find out. There's a contest on to who has the mall manager first. And whoever has the mall manager first in the appropriate jacket with the name tag and the flags gets a dinner from the professor. Okay?
Thanks, Ed. And look, I'd also like to thank Ed as the principal driver, I guess, of this idea of the Future Cities Forum and involving both politicians, the mayors and council staff and so forth, and also technical experts. And I guess as a microcosm, if you like, of some of the processes that are emerging, I think it was a great example, and people are starting to become, I think, much more appreciative and aware of how important these dense parts of our cities are. I think as an urban designer, and obviously it's my principal interest, and I think that we're now going through a change in our attitude to these places, where I think in the past we've thought of them as simply being places for business and retail and shopping, serving the suburbs that are around them as destinations for work and so forth. I think that what's starting to happen is we're seeing these as very livable, fantastic places for people to live and work, And the idea then being, you could imagine, I can certainly imagine in the case of Liverpool, we're working with Liverpool in our urban design studios at the University of Sydney. It's actually very easy to imagine living in a fantastic place where you don't need to own a car, for example, where you can walk to work. There's 5,000 jobs at Liverpool Hospital. There's fantastic river environment. There's Shipping Norton Lakes, which is just an easy cycle distance away. But why I'm saying that is that I think that one of the things that we've been struggling with for many years, I think, in the Metropolitan Plan, for example, and I was involved with the Metropolitan Plan in 2005, is this idea of what are these places? And I think we've seen them as a functional, component of the city, as opposed to seeing them as places which really could have a very different pattern of living in them. And I think that is a recognition of just the diversity of living patterns that we might have in the city in the future. We need to very consciously think about these places. And what I've found, just on the things that have come out of the three speakers, and I'm sure it'll come out in the next three speakers as well, is you see what's happened. When people have not drawn a line around it to exclude anyone from coming into this place, but simply thinking about them as places, suddenly there's a consciousness of the need to think about partnerships with people who are already in those places, alliances, different planning processes, and different roles for local government, from being simply, I think, what's tended to happen, becoming regulators, into becoming instigators, facilitators, catalysts, and actually being quite proactive. For example, when Rudy was talking about council seriously considering how can we perhaps think about providing the car parking at a precinct level to make the developers' proposals more financially viable, which we know is a problem right across the city, but particularly as we get out further west, you can see then that that's actually quite a shift in the role of government, in the way that local government, I think it's fair to say, has been retreating for many years from that sort of activity. And I think it's coming about because we're seeing these as fantastic places in their own right, not simply as something which is serving the surrounding area. So I do think that there's a few lines, trajectories, if you like, converging in these places. We do have the potential in the new planning system that's still currently being formulated and reformulated and reconsidered in various ways. I think it's probably been, I personally think, a little bit unfairly characterised as being pro-development and anti-community. And I think, on the other hand, if we say, well, no, what we need to recognise is that we want the red carpet and not the red tape. I think that's going to be, everyone was scribbling that down very, very quickly. That'll be the theme for the day. But how do you engage with communities to actually say, look, it's not about cutting corners. It's about having a vision for these potentially fantastic places and then showing the community that, yes, council will be doing a number of things which they haven't necessarily been doing so much in the past, where the council will be talking to major landowners, will be talking to major developers and financiers and so forth in an appropriate, open, transparent way, but that's a very different role for government, I think, to what we've seen in the last few years. There's been an absolute retreat for any number of reasons. The other thing, I think, with all due respect to the United States, there were positive and negative things that I think we saw. Now, why I'm bringing that up is that it was quite clear, I think, to everyone that was there that there's not the level of, let's say, cascading strategic intent from the federal level through to the state level, through to the county level, through to the borough level or whatever in the United States. The United States, I think, is fair to say, the default position really is as little government as possible. I mean, it's embedded in the Constitution. What that means is, I think what we all observed is that there's a hell of a lot of bootstrap, get up and go and make it happen because there's no one else that's going to do it for you. Now, why I bring that up is that I think we've got pretty good governance in Australia. And the the problem with having good governance is that we may tend to rely on government too much. That we expect, because we've got good governance, that it's all going to be provided by government. And largely it is. I mean, we've got a pretty good safety net, we've got good procedures and so forth, I think much stronger and much more clear, I dare say, than in the United States. So, what do we learn from the United States? Well, even if you have very little government, there's some fantastic places being made by committed citizens and committed businesses. How does that relate to New South Wales? Simply, I think we can have both. I think that what really for me came out of the study tour and going around with Ed and seeing these fantastic places, that in New South Wales, if we can combine good governance with the entrepreneurial spirit and local commitment that we saw in the United States, I think we've got a pretty bright future, actually. So that's what I got from what we just heard, and also from the trip overall.
Now we're going to continue hearing from Parramatta. There may be some slight differences in the way the presentations are going now. These first presentations have really hit on the strategy and the importance of the strategy. There's one thing that Rod didn't mention that the presentations hit on, and that is governance. That all these places, they didn't say we'll do a plan, we'll implement it, and then let things happen. In every case, there's a manager, a governor, a street manager, mall manager, someone in charge in a governance structure in charge, so the people feel that this is their property. What didn't we see on the trip? We saw no graffiti. We saw no graffiti. We saw no public furniture tied down because it belonged to the people. Now, you wouldn't say that about a lot of places, and we probably saw a lot of graffiti in New York. I wasn't with you. But even in New York, in Bryant Park, etc., no graffiti. So when it's a people's space, they regard it. When it's a government space, they disregard it. So, Parramatta.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Professor Blakely. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow mayors, councillors, GM, delegates from our business community, and also I want to mention two particular people that came along with us, and I thoroughly enjoyed their company and learned so much, and that's Rod and Bruce. Now I understand the definition behind urban planning and urban policy. Ladies and gentlemen, what can I say? This was a trip of a lifetime for myself, and along with Ms. Robin Hobbs and our CEO, Dr. Robert Lang. What I managed to understand is what our city firstly has to offer. And Parramatta is the centre of Sydney. It's the gateway to Western Sydney, and I believe we're well connected to the south, east, west and north. Our population is just over 185,000, and we have 50,000 people that come and work in our CBD. We have over 100,000 people that go through our interchange. Not to mention, as Mayor Sally mentioned about Westfields, actually we've got one of the largest, something we are proud of, and we get over 100,000 visitors a week coming to Westfield. So as you can see, it's a very busy city that's there for people to come, to live, enjoy and work. But in saying that, we've also got our challenges. Challenges like many other cities. And I'd have to say, the first city that we got to was Los Angeles. What did we learn about Los Angeles? That it's a clean city. We saw development that defined the true word of sustainable development. I learned a great deal about public domain, the open space. Therefore, I was able to make a connection between the Parramatta CBD and what I saw in Los Angeles. Then we're also a river city that connects you from Parramatta all the way to Sydney Harbour. something we are truly proud of, and our colonial heritage is very significant, just like our Aboriginal heritage. Captain Arthur Phillip sailed over 200 years ago up the Parramatta River and identified it as a city because of its fertile soil. But what Governor Lachlan Macquarie did is ensure that Parramatta was the first city, as Professor Blakely would tell me, to start activating the city and getting it moving. So we are truly blessed in the city that we have in Parramatta. But in doing so, I was always trying to find a correlation between the two cities and what can I learn. I've been to many conferences over the years, and I can honestly tell you, value for money, sleepless nights, and wearing out our shoes, I did. I gained a lot and I learned so much. So much to the point that every night I would email back to Australia about the learnings and findings that we discovered in this trip. Why? Because Parramatta is and will continue to be the driving force of Australia's most significant economic region. Last year, the Premier, Barry O'Farrell, recognised Parramatta as the regional premier city. But that's just a title, ladies and gentlemen. With that comes a lot of hard work. What we learned from the US, as mentioned, it's about working with the stakeholders. It's about working with the key people. It's about ensuring what we do to become the Sydney metropolitan city of the world. And I just looked at this beautiful harbour of ours and I think, well, guess what? We got our own harbour in Parramatta River. So my message is utilise the natural assets that you've got. But do look abroad. I recall going through Denver and Portland. They are two river cities. One's where the city has worked very well with its local residents. What they've developed is a sustainable cities where they implemented environmental measures, but not to do the actual degree that Bruce and Rod told me, that you need to plan for the city, but you need to make sure that whatever environmental measures you put in are actually affordable and sustainable. And it's about, like everything in life, it's about a compromise. So I was able to learn that and to come back and see how we can implement those measures into our own development at Parramatta Square. Parramatta Square is a $1.8 billion development, and it's been on our agenda for over 10 years. Finally, and thanks to the great work of our staff, led by our CEO, we got our first agreement signed about 3 months ago with Leighton's. Reality is coming to Parramatta. So we need to ensure that what we develop today is developed for the future. In America, everywhere I went, every city that I visited, from Boston to Washington, I was quite surprised how clean their city is. And I think one of the key things that I learned from that is the word P. They take pride. Pride in where they live, they work, and where they want to go out and socialise. And I think that's a really, really key message. It's something that our city is driving. And I want to in particular thank Professor Edward Blakely for the opportunity that was given to myself and my council colleagues to be able to go on this tour and to be able to learn, but come back and transform the knowledge and experience that we gain into our city where we have a tangible outcome. I have Jeff here with us, who's looking after one of our key projects, and that is the activation of our river foreshore. Professor Edward Blakely has been kind enough to accept to be the co-chair, along with myself, about activating our public domain. But what I'm calling it is the people's public domain. It's their place. In America, everywhere we went, they emphasised two key things. Build it for the people, but it's got to be built by the people, meaning that we should engage with the people first before we go and design and develop anything. So Professor Blakely has been able to teach me and my colleagues the true understanding of engagement with stakeholders. For far too long, local council will go out and implement a policy, then decide to engage. In America, they don't do that, ladies and gentlemen. And what else do? They take a risk. Risk need to be taken. I can't remember if it was Denver or Portland where the mayor said he believed that their city needed a new stadium. There you go. And he went out and he built it, and it was a successful project, but the city needed that. What we're seeing in Parramatta is we need to be able to activate our public domain. Church Street Mall, something that's been in the news for the wrong reasons. We know the mall is the heart and soul of our city. That's where people want to come and meet. This is where our workforce should be able to come and enjoy their free time. So we're working on our mall to redesign it, and we've got some of the best experts. We're also very fortunate to have Ethan Kent, the Vice President of Project for Public Space, who's also on this committee of ours. So we are looking to the best to bring the best out in our city. We're also looking at our Parramatta River foreshore, and that's also part of our public domain. So what I did when I came back, I put up 2 Lord Mayor minutes to ensure that the policy is in place, and I wanted the city and our organisation to embrace what we have learned. The first one was to do with our public domain, and the third component of our public domain was Parramatta Square. We need to get this right. We need to design it where it is usable, it's practical, it's safe, and it's something for the future. Then we also look at our Parramatta Square development. And this is where it requires a lot of energy. Because Parramatta Square, the whole country is looking at our Parramatta Square. And this is we are looking to the best, and that's why we've emphasised in my second Lord Mayor minute, it's about best practice. Best practice in planning the city. It's about having a policy in place where it doesn't emphasise on restrictive of heights. About the land use. In Denver, what did they teach us? Allow the property owners, allow your local universities, allow your local residents, the investors to determine what they want in their city. What we've done in Australia, and I know it's been mentioned before, we set a very good guidelines, and that's great. But our guidelines are not flexible to meet the demands of today. So our policy now is open. But what we want from it is design excellence. We want the best practice. We want sustainable development. As the Prime Minister would say, I want buildings that are sexy. I don't want buildings that are bulky and that people look at it and think, how did they ever design this? We want our city to be an attractive city for people to come and visit. But we can only get that with flexible controls and to bring on the best. And I believe we've got that. We've got that in our organisation, and we've got a council that is committed to bring out the best in our city. But in doing all of that, we have our challenges. Transport is one. And I know that our city's been committed onto a proposal of the light rail system that you've all heard of. What this will do, ladies and gentlemen, is connect the people of the region of Parramatta with the north to Macquarie Park. It will connect us up to the hills. 60% of our workforce work in Parramatta. But what we don't have is a railway connection between us and the north. So our city will continue to lobby both state and federal about getting the light rail system that we need. But we've also working with our surrounding councils together. And I want to commend the government, in spite of what was reported yesterday, commend them on the West Connect and the 25 million that they have pledged to our city. And my whole point in that, ladies and gentlemen, when you do plan a city, I look at Mr. Bradfield and I look at the legacy that he's left behind when they designed the Harbour Bridge. The Harbour Bridge was designed with 8 lanes. What do we do today? We designed the cross-city tunnels with 2 lanes going each way. My high point to the government was with West Connect, it's great. We are a city that is growing and more people are coming into our city. But we need the proper roads, we need the proper transport. And we just want to see a better connection between Parramatta and the rest of the region. And then we get on to Parramatta Square, the 90-storey Spire Tower. That is a development that will be the icon. the actual landmark and iconic development of the Western region, in my opinion, and one of the best towers that Australia will see. We can't wait. We are excited at the potential that Parramatta has. But in saying that, I've got to commend the people of Parramatta, our local residents, our local businesses that have been committed to this task. And they've stayed focused on the job, and they've all gotten behind our city. It's not easy. We've worked on this project for 12 years, and now finally we have got a project that will soon become a reality. So in just concluding, I just want to say, I want to thank you, Professor Blakely. I want to thank also Harriet, Sandy, for your time, for your patience that you put into this trip. And I would encourage the state government to get more councils involved. I would encourage every council that's got a big urban project that they do engage with you with the United Study. And I also want to thank the people of the US for their wonderful hospitality. But I also want to say thank you to the people that came along on the trip. And I must say, I can't tell you how much I enjoyed your wonderful company and the friends that we've made. And so in summary, thank you.
I know the mayor earlier expressed concern about two of the cities we went to, Boulder and Fort Collins, and I'm in contact with them regarding their needs. Right now, they just want to keep us in mind, the U.S. government's very funny. If you provide assistance to a city, when FEMA comes, they discount that. So if we sent them $100,000, and they're supposed to get $1 million, they get $900,000, because the idea here is people who can help themselves should, and so you're penalized in a sense for helping yourself, so we want to wait and see what their strategic needs are, and one of them is unfortunately me, because I helped, as you guys know, do the Boulder plan. So we'll see how that works out. But it's hard to be at two places at the same time. At any rate, please, I'd like you to try to get a minute from each of your councils in support of those communities, and I'd like to send those minutes to the communities saying that the visitors' hearts are with them in their most trying time. Next, we will hear from Wallara. Botany. I'm sorry. And the staff has to keep me on track, you know. Botany, then Wallara. On the wrong page, as usual.
Sorry, I'm not the mayor. I wanted to offer his apology. He did want to be here today, but unfortunately had other engagements that he had to attend, so he's asked me to present on his behalf. What I wanted to talk about was that we originally started with a very small precinct of our Wilson Pemberton Street precinct, and I think the fantastic aspect of this program and the trip that our mayor was able to go on to the US has allowed us to look at a whole new vision for our local government area, which we've now talking about our 2040 vision. So we've been able to take these ideas that have been made available to us in this program and really take it to our whole local government area and not just one precinct, which is very exciting for our council. What I want to talk about is where we're actually located. So we are to the south of the City of Sydney Council. We also adjoin Randwick, Marrickville and also Rockdale Council. We also have the Sydney Airport, which is the busiest aviation hub in Australia. We also have Port Botany and its expansion that will be happening over the next 10 years, which is a fantastic driver for our freight and employment opportunities. We also have the economic gateway between City of CBD, also to our airport, Port Botany, and also to our south and southwest sectors. And on that actual corridor, we have over 100,000 vehicle movements per day. So we have a lot of through traffic through our local government area. Also our east-west connections along Foreshore Drive and Gardeners Road, which are major connections through to the west with our freight rail traffic, have over 50,000 vehicles per day. So we have a lot of transport issues that we need to address, but they also present a lot of opportunities for us. As part of the Metro Strategy 2031, we've been able to develop our local government plan, which was thankfully gazetted in June this year, which is very exciting for our council. It's been 6 years in the making, and we've actually been able to show that we can not only reach, but we have exceeded our employment and residential targets. Over the last 6 years, council has been able to facilitate the development of over 3,000 new dwellings in our local government area, which is a huge achievement for our council. What we actually also have in terms of our location is looking at, we have significant connections to our universities and our higher education areas, so the University of New South Wales, Sydney Uni and UTS, which is a great driver for us in terms of how we address those populations of students as well and capitalising on those regional areas where we're located. What we've then turned to is looking at building this vision of 2040 and what that will mean for us. And I think the Mayor got a lot out of the trip to the US and how to look at visioning for our community. What he was trying to engage is a place where our children can live but also retire, a place where we can provide good local jobs, first-class recreational facilities, shopping and service precincts that are vibrant and interesting, providing an easy way for our community to get around and move within our local government area, particularly given our transport challenges. And we also wanted to maintain what we've been achieving with our previous mayor, who's now a state member, is this clean and green vision of going from our hazardous industries of our past and that legacy that it's left us with and moving towards cleaner, greener industries and sustainable communities. So how are we doing this? There's a lot of challenges and opportunities that this presents. What the economic corridor between Sydney CBD and the south has made available to us with the traffic movements is that we've been able to envisage the second stage of our Mascot Station precinct, which is now looking to include our new town centre, which is a vibrant new commercial hub, and will also provide the next stage of our residential delivery in that centre, which also will take advantage of the Mascot Station which is there, which connects to the airport and also through to the city, which engages in more public transport opportunities. This is also in close context with our airport environment area, which is our next commercial hub, which is just to the north of the airport, and engaging with a key partner there being Qantas, who is looking at revitalising their hub and providing a new commercial precinct. We've also got the Port Botany expansion, which is also an exciting prospect for us in terms of providing new freight rail opportunities with our goods line that runs right through the centre of our LGA, and also looking at how that will be facilitated with the West Connects. So that's also another key transport opportunity for us, and it also presents a lot of challenges as it will be coming out within our local government area. It hasn't pinpointed exactly where that connection will be, which presents the challenge, but we're hoping that that will deal with a lot of our freight traffic and how that will be moved from our Port Botany Centre out to the west, and moving that freight transport through our area more easily without having to take a lot of impact to our local infrastructure. What we also want to achieve is also integrating with the new light rail, which is a really exciting project that the state government is working on. At the present point, it finishes at the Kingsford Junction. What we want to see is an opportunity for the extension of that light rail, an extension to the new British American Tobacco Precinct, which is just to the north of our East Gardens Westfield site. And we're hoping that that connection will provide another public transport opportunity to a community that could potentially have 2,000 new dwellings on that precinct. So it's a real opportunity to extend that public transport infrastructure and provide a new transport opportunity for our local government area. So with the challenges of trying to achieve the vision and looking at the different opportunities and constraints that we have within our local government area, We've understood that we can't do this on our own, and the tour and also this program has shown us that there's a need to engage with our partners. So we've engaged the services of Kinesis, Place Partners and New Democracy to meet the challenges that we have in developing the vision. And a critical aspect of this is looking at the process of governance and what is good governance, and how we can engage the community to have buy-in to our vision. We also want to have the buy-in of our local, state and federal government agencies, because we know that these challenges cannot be met by the local government alone. We need buy-in from state government and federal government with their large land holdings, and also trying to achieve the infrastructure visions of the state and federal government. What we want to encourage with ownership of this vision is the partnerships also with our business community, because we know without our business community a lot of these visions would not happen, and we need to engage them in terms of what they see as their opportunities and their constraints to development. What we're trying to do is also look at new ways of achieving best practice in community engagement, and that's to occur with our partnerships with New Democracy. What we want to do is look at how we engage with the new planning system. I think that's a challenge for every council, is how we deliver on this new planning system and how we go about our strategic visioning, and trying to engage the community so that they have ownership of this new planning system as well as the government. I think it's a really exciting time for our council, and I'm glad that we've moved beyond our precinct and looking at our local government area as a whole and how we can take our vision to 2040. And I'd like to extend a big thank you to Professor Ed Blakely and the US Studies Centre for giving our council this opportunity to be involved in this program and developing our relationships with the US Studies Centre. We think we have a real opportunity to make a difference with our community and take it into the future. So thank you very much.
Well, now it is Willara and Vice Mayor Reagan. O'Regan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. And we were just noting at the table that Waverley and Willara are at the bookends of the presentation today, so it's wonderful to be here. Some of the things that I'm going to say really are just reinforcing what some of the others have said. You know, there are some key themes that have come out of what I'm calling really a journey that we've all started along. You know, there's a long way to go. It's been great so far, but there have been some challenges and there will continue. But I think as long as we keep it all in perspective, it will work well. The other one is around collaboration, and I'm pleased today that one of the key partners in the work that we're doing at Willara Council for our Double Bay precinct is the local business chamber, and so I have both Greg and Leslie with me here today, and they've been wonderful participants in this program as well. But I do think it's appropriate that what I'll first do is just run through just some of the things around the Double Bay precinct and the project specifically, and then I'll actually bounce up to some of the more strategic things which you've heard a little bit about already. So for those who don't know, Willara Council nestles just a little bit around the corner between Sydney City Council and also Waverley Council. There's harbour, there's coast, there's a high density population, there's a real mix within the area. It's not large like a Parramatta or Liverpool, but it has a fairly interesting population. But right at the heart is what has been an economic centre for us, has been Double Bay. It nestles down in the sort of valley area, and it's been a real great place for commercial, recreational activity for many, many years, and it's attracted people not only locally but internationally. But I guess in some ways things have changed, and it's been competition from Bondi Junction, the big Westfield malls, that some of these more local precincts have really struggled to where do they go to next? We've got a high percentage of vacancies. All the retail operators are struggling in terms of turnover. Consumers are changing their behaviour in terms of retail. So this has sort of created a bit of a challenge to us. Plus there's things like an ageing population that we need to take into consideration. Council itself has also looked at this particular area in about 10 years and has finally actually got a major development of in the what's called Cura Lands site. So it's almost like a cornerstone of the particular area. And there's about 2 other development areas in there. And I can say when I first came as council, everyone had a great idea about what to do with each of those developments, as well as you hear from different stakeholders, businesses, residents, what you can do, what you can't do. And I always said they were all good ideas, but you don't know how it all fits together. How do you get this jigsaw puzzle to work to make it sustainable? Likewise, how do you actually put in some of those sustainable principles so that whether it's water, whether it's energy, those things can start working a little bit better than what it has in the past. So we essentially started off with a range of questions that we all come to, and that is, how do we increase the foot traffic and the business transactions of that particular commercial district? How do we actually improve the brand? Double Bay has had that terrible but sometimes wonderful sort of brand that sort of says it's Double Bay, double pay. It is known for its quality. Do we throw that out and start it again, or do we leverage it? Do we need to fix the street so it actually reflects that particular brand value? How do we reduce some of those shop vacancies that we're experiencing? What do we do with those major developments? There's another one which is trying to, do we get a cinema in there? What do we do with the hotel that's been vacant for, gosh, it must be several years now? So those were some of the questions that we came to, and really it was through this process, both the Mayor Forum and then reinforced through our trip to the US, that we tested some of the scenarios that we'd started to develop. And they're sort of depicted here on the board for you. And some of these have applied, I can hear in some of the other presentations, is that we first and foremost needed a gateway. People need to know that you've arrived in a particular precinct, that whether that's depicted by the buildings, by some banners, by the roadway, it really needs to know that you're there and then you've left. So how can we use what's New South Head Road, which is a state road, to actually create that sense of arrival and sense of departure? But also, mostly, there's a ferry wharf. It's a commuter wharf. And the state government's just recently announced that there'll be some more ferries and the timetable's increasing. So you're getting opportunities for people to walk through, but why can't we get them to purchase while they're on their way? What's not working in that particular area? But we need to create and use those gateways. As I said, we've got brand equity in that quality Double Bay brand. How can we build on that unique value? And where we've landed here through this particular process is that we can start to develop the arts and cultural precinct that we have. And that might sound wonderfully visionary, but it can also relate to some of the retail. So it would mean that we can start to proactively attract certain types of retailers. A bakery shouldn't be necessarily someone that's a commoditised bakery, but more of an artisan bakery. If we're going to have a cinema, it shouldn't necessarily be a multi-cinema showing lots of movies, which might be more appropriate that's happening up at the junction. It should be more of an art house cinema. So again, once you've established that there's a particular brand that you want to use and a theme that wraps around, you can start to actually create a whole lot of different things that link into that to create a particular place. Then we've also started to look at the street activation. There are key areas where things have been, whether it's retail or activity, it's miles back from the street, so you sort of have to peer your way through and try and find it. One of the things that we have been doing is with the new hotel operator, and we've got Intercontinental that have taken over the particular, what was the Ritz-Carlton there in Double Bay. We actually said, how can you use your ground floor? It's all dark and gloomy in there, and I have sort of not sure how to actually, go in there. How do you bring that back out onto the street? So some real activation that needs to happen. I think many of us have been to Melbourne and seen some of the amazing things they do to laneways. And we saw some of the laneways while we were away, and there was some more in New York where the one in New York I saw was completely graffiti-filled, terrible. It was sort of down at the bottom of Manhattan. And over time, just with some simple things, they made a life out of it. People ate and they drank there and they really socialised there. So Double Bay has a plethora of laneways and we don't use them. So how can we actually start to connect those laneways to the other parts of the precinct? And connectivity and mobility is another interesting thing, and some of the preliminary work we've done is looking at the foot traffic. Where do people walk? How do they get from here to there? And the patterns that are there both in the pedestrian and the traffic really need some work to start making it easy to get to a certain place. And once you've bought that bread, then you can get your coffee. Then you can go and have a look at this. So there are a number of things that we can start to do to make it a precinct that's worth doing and it's worth spending not just 5 minutes at, but several hours at. And likewise what I said in terms of making sure that those developments, like Kiora Lands, which is a significant project, and I'm sure I'll be corrected, I think it's taken us about 10 years as a council to actually make happen. The back laneway we hadn't really thought about using. And through this process, we really start to think of it and look at it in a very different way. So it's really been worthwhile from that perspective. Likewise, within that Kiora Lands development, one of the major investments of the council is a library. Now, how do we fit a library into that arts and cultural theme is really important. How do we use that library, a major community asset, for the business development, for social interaction, for the youth? Start to actually make it more than just a place where you go and someone tells you to be quiet. So they're probably some of the 6 learnings specifically for the Double Bay precinct. And just stepping back a little, I really thought that there was 4 other learnings, and listening to Rod, he's probably picked up on a couple of them, and so have a few others. And that is, one of the things I found is that we needed a vision. It's almost like a cultural change within the council, 180 degrees from where planning instruments have then told us what we can do and what we can't do, and the community are up in arms and then we don't do it. So where we've come through here is actually creating that vision of what we want to do. And once you start articulating that, getting people engaged on that, some of the more sort of transactional, tactical things drop away to the side. So, but it also means, whilst we're doing a lot of work around our governance model of how to take the Double Bay project forward, we can actually have those conversations with the Intercontinental and say, hey, our vision is this. What can you do? Should you actually have some of the artists in a gallery downstairs which can show people how to do art? And they embrace that. They actually want to know how to fit into that particular community. So a vision is been absolutely fantastic, and doing a top-down approach rather than that bottom-up traditional approach. But that's going to take time, but I think we're getting in the right direction. Leadership is also an interesting thing, and it has been mentioned that sometimes I think council has also taken an approach which is build it and they will come, and then they don't, and then you try and do something else. So I think actually being proactive, if the council is going to facilitate economic development, whether it's in Double Bay or somewhere else, we need to actually say, no, we want the artisan bakery. We don't want the other one. So we want that type of cinema. We don't want that one. And why don't we go out and seek them rather than just put the sign up and see what happens? And that for council is a very, very different role, but an important one. The other one is around governance structure, and one of the big takeouts I took on the US tour in particular was around business improvement districts, where those districts own and have a stake in the destiny of what actually happens in their place. Again, council can play a role in that, but if the operators and owners of that particular district can actually drive those outcomes, then I think you'll actually get a better one. And we've had some workshops recently at Woollahra Council, and I can tell you, some of the retail operators going, yes, love it. I'll pay to be part of a business district to get things moving. So there really is, I think, some momentum there that we can leverage to put a governance structure around the precinct. That governance structure can look after the management and the maintenance of that particular area, as well as the marketing. One of the things which I think is challenging for us and potentially the state government as well is, where does all the money come from? How do we finance these things? And there seems to be far more use in the states of non-traditional financing mechanisms. Now, I don't know if we're in a place where we can do the tax incremental financing model that they do over there, but I know that we can do some great value capture opportunities here. So it's being flexible. It's working potentially with the state to be more flexible, to pilot a few ways to fund these things. It's always about the money in the end, so I'm keen to get some of those going. The third one really sits around community engagement, and I agree with some of the other comments that have been made, and Botany made the point, is we actually have to think about community engagement in a very different way. With the planning reforms, we need to do more, but it isn't basically a tell them what's going on. It's, listening to what's happening and what do they particularly want. And in some ways, I kind of think it's actually educating the community. As a member of the community before I was involved in council, I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what was important. So they actually need to be brought on that particular journey as well. Otherwise, they're left stranded. I also think the point is, and it was definitely a real learning for me, is I learnt on this program and in the US, not just from the experts that we and other councils that we engaged with while we were over there, but we also learnt from each other, and I think that we can work across boundaries. So there is definitely an opportunity to engage not just the community and the constituent community, but fellow councillors, businesses, and other service providers. Now, the last one is really a point that Rob made, and it's just a reminder, again, it's all about placemaking. If we think about the people first and what they want and create a place that's great, then it really makes a difference than actually having a place that no one wants to go to. And there are things, whether it's about adopting more form-based planning models, to actually look at being flexible to deliver the outcomes rather than being prescriptive or a regulator. So I think from a Double Bay perspective, we've made some decent progress. We are in a place where we're looking at how to look at the governance model. We've had forums with the community, we've had forums with the business. We're trying to actually test some of our scenarios in terms of that engagement. I've always been cautious, not trying to tell them the whole story, which I've just outlined to you. I'm sort of almost drip feeding so that we're not necessarily going to get, no, you can't do that because you'll have to actually increase your planning controls for another height. Then it all falls off the table. So I'm really just being very cautious and doing a very slow but deep engagement with some of those community members. Like I said, though, we are looking at some of the developments that are underway, the library, the hotel, and start to actually shape that in accordance with the vision. We've had some discussions with some of the cinema operators recently as well. So I think in terms of next steps, we're looking at establishing that governance model. I understand that we've also got some actions in the New South Wales Government Planning Reform Fund, so we're hoping to actually get some funding to start looking at this in a bit more detail. One of the other things which I'm pretty proud of is that this model that we're doing at Double Bay, we're now also thinking about how we can apply to other precincts. Many of you may have travelled around Oxford Street. It was known for high fashion. Again, what is the problem? Diagnosing the problem, working with stakeholders to get to a solution. Those things that we're doing and starting to do around Oxford Street emanate from this particular program as well. So I think in summary, there's an importance that we take a strategic approach. I do think that Council needs to constantly draw on a range of resources, and we are looking forward to using Ed and some of his team and Kinesis, who are actively involved in our Council as well, but others, to actually bring some of that capability into the Council. It's about engaging the community. It's about being flexible with those finance structures, and it's thinking about doing things differently, but partnering with local and state government and businesses to achieve that. So over the time, I think it's been a great team effort by everybody in the room and some who couldn't obviously make it today. But I'm pretty sure we'll get to the destination. We've just got a bit more to do. Thank you.
Speaking of team, Sandy. Where's Sandy? Team. Harriet. As you guys noticed, I didn't do much. But with Rod, and asked Bruce to say a few words, Harriet, and Sandy, the only thing I had to do, is just be the pretty face. So I'd like Bruce to say a few words now. Bruce brought a perspective that is very essential to what we're about, and that's the sustainability perspective, while Rod brought more of the planning perspective. I'd like Bruce to comment on what he's heard and what he feels we need to go forward. Come on, Bruce.
Thanks, Ed. Well, I think what planning instrument would have brought Parramatta, Botany and Wallara together the way Ed did? None that I can think of. And I think that was the first learning of the trip we had, that how much these guys have in common. And, John talked about pride of what he saw in the states, in the cities that we visited. Well, no one gave a bigger example of pride when John had a Parramatta Eels jacket on in Rodeo Drive. So I think that was one of the standouts of my trip. But I think what they all described is about how we saw those business improvement districts that Catherine talked about pulling together, particularly the one at Denver stood out for me, possibly because it seemed the most cohesive group of stakeholders I've ever seen, all pulling in the one direction, but probably more likely, given my interest and background, that it was so data rich. And I don't know if you can remember, they had this little 4-page document that were full of statistics and facts about what they'd done and where they were going. And I think that, to me, typified some of the opportunities that I think Rod articulated, that given the governance and structure and the people and the capacity that Australian cities do have, you saw, I think, because I definitely saw it, that in many areas you're significantly more well advanced than the cities that you saw in the States. And Dave and I, at the end of the trip, we did a little extension to New York with the assistance of Ed and Sandy, and had a meeting with the New York City Urban Design and City Planning team. And Dave and I took the luxury to show some of the work that we'd done with your cities, and the tools that we use and the data we collect and how we do that analysis and the thinking that Rod adds to that. And they were blown away. So the head of their urban design team said he'd never seen anything like the tools and that we're applying with your cities. And I think that comes from the stuff that we have developed that we applied with you has come out of government. It came out of basics, it came out of precincts, it came out of the investment from a bunch of state agencies, the EPA, planning, urban growth. Many of you are here today. So I also think that John mentioned it, and Catherine has certainly talked about it, and I think Ben best articulated on the trip that there's a nebulous phrase of best practice, but he wants best practice to come from best ideas. And Rod's always had a saying with the work that we do, the best idea wins. Okay, so Glenys used to think that we were always fighting on the bus, but it's largely a lot of creative tension when Rod and I get together, but normally the best idea wins. And I think some of the growth that we saw in the participating cities, so if you go back to the pretty intense workshop that Ed had us working like slaves on to set that two-day workshop up, 3-day work, yeah, I thought I saw Parramatta go from beyond biggest building to what's the best public domain and the interface of that big building. And so they started talking about that public domain stuff more and more. And then I think Catherine talking about the laneways and the fine grain, but not starting at the buildings. So we actually started with photos of the pedestrians on New South Head Road in the 50s and 60s when it was double pay. Okay. And I think what we saw of some of those cities across the states that every council saw, and they presented it really well, they told a 30-year story of change. That it wasn't instant, it wasn't 5 years, it wasn't one strategy, it wasn't one mayor, it wasn't one administration. It was 30 years of change, but we could see it. And I think when Catherine started with the workshop and talked about, it's almost planning's version of Einstein's version of insanity, that doing the same thing over and over again, expecting to get a different result in New South Head Road wasn't going to work. And so, we threw up some crazy ideas. We were talking about apartment sizes, 50 square metres versus 200, very little car parking. But it was all driven to what John was talking about earlier. It's about sustainability, but financial feasibility. So often we talk about the economics when we're doing the big city plans and the big kind of shape makers, but we were down talking about would someone build it with their own money? And I think that's what probably no one talked about today. The first question that was often asked, and Leslie might have asked this a few times on the trip, was how did you guys pay for that? How did you fund it? Where did it come from? Who went broke doing it? And who picked up the pieces? And there were good and bad stories from all the cities that we mentioned. So, look, I would just like to say, Ed, that I think you've seen that no one wants to be defined by an LEP, They want the governance and the security of that, but they really do want the best ideas to win in their place. So that's all I got out of the trip, but it's plenty enough. Thank you.
It is on. I'd like the electeds, Mayor Chiddick, will you come up? And Vice Mayor O'Regan and Sally, would you guys come up and take some seats here? I'm going to pretend to be Oprah. I'm the only one in the room who can do that. We're related. We both come from Africa. But I know some urban growth people will raise your hands. I noticed you guys have come in, and thank you for coming. I probably missed some people from other agencies who've come. The reason all of you were invited to this is not planning and infrastructure's job alone. This is not environment's job alone. This is not urban growth's job alone. It's not the city's job alone. And it's not one city's job alone. If Wallara doesn't work with Waverley, neither one of them will achieve what they want to do. And Liverpool and Parramatta have to work together, because any rail or anything like that is going to affect both of them, and those jobs are going to come to us, not one of us. And none of our citizens actually know where the boundaries are. When they get up in the morning, they go to work, they don't say, I'm going to work in, I'm just going to work, and I'm sleeping in such and such a place. And what we want to do is make sure that they never have to find out. And I don't think anyone in Portland actually really knew. It just seemed to be good everywhere. And that's where we want to get to. So I'm just going to, we've got two of those, okay. Ask each of the mayors to make kind of a little benediction comment on where they think, as an elected, we need to take this, okay?
Waverley's, I think, for a small council, considering we've only got 68,000 people and 9.2 square kilometres, so we, in comparison to some other councils, we're quite little. But I think we, in environmental areas, are known for the things we've done. I think we've been a leader in environmental things, and we intend to continue doing that. So our idea of making Bondi Junction completely sustainable with shared electricity, recycling, and our garbage underground will really cement us as being an environmental leader amongst all councils. We also think, which will be a relief to some of the government officials around here, that we may not have to knock on state government doors to get the funding for that. We believe that by working via our LEP and our development potential in Bondi Junction, and with partners such as Westfield, very important partners, that we can get that funded through our development potential in Bondi Junction. So to be able to deliver that without having to go cap in hand specifically to the state or federal government, I think will be an amazing outcome. So it's a grand vision. We believe absolutely that we can deliver it. Our biggest challenge is bringing the community with us, because they are afraid of overdevelopment, that horrible, horrible word, overdevelopment. But I think that we can do that. So we're starting on that first step of making sure that we communicate properly with our community, and then move forward to build an amazing, sustainable city.
So I hear two things in here. One is brand, and the other is risk. And if you got a good brand and you take a risk and you succeed, everyone else takes the credit. A namesake of mine, Susan Blakely. Have you heard the name? she developed that new kind of corset, I guess, what do we call it. And it's a $1 billion company. And the interviewer asked her, what inspired her? She said, my dad. What'd your dad do? Every night he asked my brother and myself, what'd you fail in today? Because if you haven't failed anything, you haven't tried anything. That could be the motto of the United States. That if you're trying, you can have some failures. If you're not trying, you're not going to have any failures, but you'll have absolutely no successes. So we might have some little failures in this environmental program, but 2 or 3 successes will make us big. Oh, thank you, Sally. What do you have?
I'll add a couple of things if I can. So first and foremost, I think that doing things across boundaries is really important. And even though Waverley and Woollahra are close, there is still Sydney City and others, and there's no point Woollahra Council reinventing the wheel. And if there are gains that your council, Sally, are having in terms of the sustainability there at the junction, then why can't we learn and leverage those? There's a classic story to Ed's point where Woollahra Council was doing their cycleways, and I was speaking to a particular person, and I said, why did you stop there? And that was where the boundary was between Waverley and Woollahra. And I said, well, what does the cyclist do? So the interconnectivity of the cycleway, just because it just stopped, which made no sense at all.
The railroads used to stop at Albury, so.
Yeah, it was quite funny. The second one is, I talk to my fellow councillors, and they are so entrenched with the DA process in a very prescriptive micromanagement way, and it's going to take time to get them what I call out of the weeds, out of the sandpit, whatever expression you'd like to use, to start thinking about these sorts of things. It's their comfort zone, and so they are scared. They don't want to take that risk because this is what they know, where the air conditioning unit goes on the left or the right, should we move? And, we have amazing constituents. You've probably seen in the Herald this week, so Lachlan Murdoch's property is, getting headlines. And so do we actually move the pool, a couple of metres one way or the other? We spend hours doing this. And it's an important issue, but there are other issues that we need to make time for, and we don't. And I think they're just a little bit too risk averse to do that.
Yeah, I think Detroit spent a lot of time on where to locate the swimming pool. They forgot where to locate the city, and in Detroit, the metropolitan area is one of the wealthiest in the United States, but the city is the poorest because people abandon the heart simply because the leadership of that heart refused to do what the people asked them to do. There were good plans and good planners in Detroit, but the mayor and council thought they knew better than the people, and there's the result. If you don't work with the people, they can vote with their feet.
Ed, can I just add on to something that Catherine said? I think I do need to say that Waverley took a very brave decision 3 months ago, whatever it is, and we decided to move to a decision-making IHAB. It was an amazing decision. I don't have to worry about hardstand car parks anymore. I can worry about tri-generation in Bondi Junction. But so we've had 3 meetings of our development application panel, and I have to tell you the response that we've got from our residents is amazing. They feel listened to. They feel that they've been given a lot of time to put their case forward. Not everybody's completely happy with the decision, but they understand how the decision came about. And I've got to say that any council that really wants to look at this, they should look at it. It is the really best thing. Our experience is pretty, it's only a trial and it's only been 3 months, but it's been fantastic. So we'll be talking to our friends at Woollahra.
Well, and as you know, the cities we went to all had them. And so the city council spends time on the strategy, the vision, the direction, and the future. The most amazing event we had was the last evening where the city council of Fort Collins, en masse, came and drank beer with us, played pool, and so forth, and sang the praises of their city in the most subtle ways that was so inclusive. It was beautiful. And you could tell they were accustomed to including by the way they behaved. And it was an illegal thing. You know, they weren't supposed to be there, all of them, at one place. But they were being what you want us all to be, welcoming, bring us your people, bring us your money, and we'll collaborate and work together. John?
Yes, thank you, Professor. Your question was, what would the elected governing body would like to do? Yeah. Well, the feedback that I've had so far, a lot of my fellow councillors and especially the new deputy who's been on council for a number of years, a decade, what they said is they'd like to see a program implemented within all councils where through your university that a study, a program that actually will go out and educate, and if I could use that politely, educate councillors about sustainable cities. What is the definition of sustainable cities? I knew the basics of it. Now I believe I've got a better understanding of it. How do you design a city? What is about urban renewal? So I believe a step forward, what the councillors has asked me to look into, to talk to you about putting together a program where there's study courses available. Because then it actually allows us to bring on the business community too. I see our good friend Les was here and I asked him, with David, I asked him about the purpose of his trip. And he, as a stakeholder, wanted to learn more about how they do things around the world, especially in the US. But I also believe that I learned from talking to him, what does an investor, a stakeholder, look for? And what I'm trying to encourage our organisation is to go through a slightly cultural turn and start understanding what is our role. Our role is to deliver the best services to our community. Maybe cleaning up their parks, expanding their swimming pool, or developing a city hub. But it's about educating, bringing people on, and to understand the key word, and that is we are doing things for the people. And they need to be brought on board. They need to have a sense of ownership. Once you give people a sense of ownership, you could always turn around and say, if we never got it right, we tried our best. And if you failed, you won't die wondering.
Good. I want to talk to some of the managers, Farouk and Dr. Lang. Is Dr. Lang still here? And Alan? Glennis. Why don't you guys come up here with the same thing in mind? Well, what did managers get out of this that they think will be useful in the future, and what else might we do? Come on, sit down.
Am I first?
Yeah, you're first.
Okay. I just wanted to give this a little bit of a personal perspective because I think as a local government planner, I tend to go into my office on a daily basis. I've got a beautiful office overlooking the harbour. But I tend to be preoccupied with the day-to-day minutiae of that job. I've got 80 staff across a great portfolio, and they all need to be looked after in terms of salaries and, you know, all the leave and all of the HR stuff with that. And on top of that, we have to service the day-to-day needs of the council with committees running every week from week to week. And what I find is that there's kind of very little time to look over the borders. There's little time to look at the bigger picture in terms of where we're travelling as an organisation. This program gave me an opportunity to get away from that day-to-day minutiae. For the first time, I met my colleague at Waverley, Peter Monk, at the Mayor's Forum. I know that Peter was a recent appointment to Waverley, but we hadn't met. So that was the first thing. I think also, you go on a journey, and you do have certain perceptions or expectations about what you might see and what you might learn. And I think that my perceptions of certainly the US city was one that was very car-based, one that was based on the concept of freeways, of large malls, and of downtown areas that were largely deserted. And I think that if you probably went to the cities that we went to 30 years ago, Los Angeles, Denver, and Portland, and so on and so forth, that is probably what we would have seen. But I think what we did see was a remarkable transformation, that these cities do now have vibrant downtown areas, and they have gone through these remarkable transformations. The question then for us is, well, how did they do it? And what were the common themes that we saw when we visited these cities? And for me, there were a couple of things that came through. Firstly, very strong political leadership and strong vision. I remember the former mayor of Portland, Sam Adams, talking about his vision for the future of that city. And it was ambitious. It was difficult. But he brought his community on with that vision.
And he failed a few times.
And he probably failed a few times. But he has now a very livable, mixed-use city, which is easy to move around, which is attractive to live and to work, and undoubtedly a great transformation. Public investment was a major issue. Cities in the United States invested in their downtown centres, whether it was in new parks, as we saw in Los Angeles, or in Portland, or in civic and cultural facilities, in sports stadia, in creating an environment for new private investment. It was something that was common across all of those areas. As far as downtown revitalisation was concerned, the BIDs, the business improvement districts, were an essential element of that. And we tend not to have those kind of organisations in Australia, but what I found was that all successful downtown precincts had some form of BID organisation. In other words, there was an approach to integrated management, marketing and maintenance, and that successful precincts need the 3 M's. Okay? Mixed land use was another thing. Having a population that lives in downtown areas, that live in our precincts. And you saw from our Double Bay panel our idea of actually encouraging a new resident population within that precinct and doing it in a way which is much more sustainable than historically that's been possible. I think all of those lessons are transferable to Australia. And I think if the US can do it, we can do it.
Absolutely.
Okay? Catherine presented our panel today. We emerged from this process with a list of workable and achievable strategies. They're not just sky in the pie type of things. They're workable and achievable, but they do require a shift in mindset, and they do require a shift in the way we actually go about doing our business. I think I've taken up enough time. And I always remember, Ed, your last words in Denver, where you said, we need to move from making plans to making plans happen. And that was the key line that is left in my mind. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Ed. For me, what I take away from this is opportunity. We have a council that's growing exponentially. We'll have a city the size of Canberra in our backyard over the next decade or two. We have a new council that's only been in office 12 months, and they've come in there, and one of the first things I did when they were elected was take them on a weekend workshop and get them to know, because we had a number of new councillors, what local government's all about. The workshop enabled us to get to know each other and see what our city needed. You know, what were you there for? Why did your constituents put you there? At the end of the day, our council, there are areas in our council, despite the massive growth, particularly in places like the mall and in the southern end of our CBD, that's tired, it's quiet, it's dark, and it's just not alive. Now the council knows that, and it wanted to take an active, dynamic, progressive measure to revitalise the city, and we started that process before this program came along. This program came along at just the right time, because we were there to get ideas, to look at the way we process development applications, the way we work with our partners, or not, if that was the case. So to establish relationships in order to deliver to our constituents what they should have always had for many a year. This was an opportunity for us to go and not only see what we're doing well and not so well, but see what others are doing well and not so well. Because you can learn as much from what people do not so well.
Failure is a teacher.
Exactly, as well as what they do well. My role as the CEO is to foster that. As I said earlier, we've developed a City Revitalisation Committee, specially developed to focus on implementing these ideas. It's not a talk fest. It wasn't a walk around or the holiday. It was hard work, a lot of research, and now that research has been put into strategic documents, and there is a committee now that's driving this, and that committee has the mayor, the deputy mayor, senior officers of council, yourself. They're not. We're talking senior officers and councillors to drive this vision.
With dates, times, timetables. So the jacket splitter comes soon.
And ultimately, the council has given itself a time frame. It wants to see cranes in the next 12 months. It wants to see deliverables within the rest of this term of 3 years. So I think this tour fosters and encourages people to think outside the square, to take the risk. I think, unfortunately, local government generally have been, as do most governments, are very risk averse, and probably inward looking. This is an opportunity for us to go out, to talk with developers. They're not the boogeymen. To talk with investors, to talk with financiers, to talk with our constituents, to talk with the shop owners, to ask our customers what they want and what they want from a mall. When we deliver a mall, what do you want from a mall? And in Boulder and other malls that we saw, and they had the mall manager, they weren't even funded by the council. I mean, you had businesses funding them. Why not? Look at the value they were providing. So there is so much that's there for us to learn, and my role is to turn that knowledge into deliverables. And I think this has given us just the tools to do that.
Glynis?
I'll have to borrow that. Thanks, Farouk. Yes, well, Ed, I agree with everything that Alan and Farouk have said, and I'm sure I'll agree with everything that Rob says. For Blacktown, also, the project the opportunity arose at a good time for Blacktown. Farouk's moving to a city the size of Canberra. Blacktown's already the size of Canberra and is moving to the size of Tasmania. So our growth, we will accommodate another 185,000 dwellings over the next 30 years. And that's a huge amount of growth for an area that has been experiencing growth for the last 40 years non-stop. So for us, it was really the perfect opportunity. And we did have a project and an area of the Blacktown CBD that really needs revitalisation and needs good governance, needs ideas, needs inspiration. And really, for me, and I think for Rudy and Len, what we got out of the trip and the workshop beforehand was inspiration and ideas, and it enabled us to reflect where we are and where we want to go to. And, I couldn't really take anything specific. I couldn't say, well, this was, an astounding idea. It was one idea. It was a range of fantastic ideas that we were confronted with, not only from the places we saw and the new people we spoke to, but also from Ed and Rod and Bruce and Sandy. You really did mentor us and give us the opportunity to learn from your great knowledge and experience, and I think that was terrific. And the other thing that I really took out of it was understanding the differences between the other 5 councils in Blacktown, but also seeing the similarities. We all face very similar challenges. We all want the best for our areas, and we really want to work together. And I think, the relationships I think I've built with my equivalents at the other councils, I think I will cherish, and I think we'll have ongoing contact, which will be really valuable, particularly Farouk and me, because we're close in Western Sydney. And really, it was a camaraderie of the whole group. It was a fantastic trip. It was grueling. You were up early in the day, walking the whole day, and
we walked 120 kilometres.
and exhausted at night. But it was a fantastic time, and I really, on behalf of Blacktown, I thank the United States Studies Centre for granting Blacktown the opportunity, and I truly believe we'll be engaging with you and your people much more in the future. So thank you very much.
Doctor?
Thank you, Ed. 2 points, and I'll be very brief. I think the first one is the understanding of the global trend in urbanisation. It's happening in the States, it's happening here, it's going to happen here more. And with that understanding, and it's for lots of different reasons all around the globe, but demographics is playing a very large part of it. The challenge, I think, for us in Sydney is that we can't continue to build the houses on the western fringe and the jobs on the eastern fringe and call that a sustainable city. You just can't do it. So there is going to be a dramatic shift in Sydney over the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, where that's going to change. And whether it means more jobs in the urban centres, the big cities, Liverpool and Parramatta and those kinds of places, or whether it means more jobs out where the people are living, wherever they may be, both things probably need to occur. But the challenge for this state and for this government, I think, in New South Wales, is we don't currently have a policy on urbanisation. We don't currently have a strategy in how we're going to deliver that change that is inevitably coming. Now, Urban Growth is in a fantastic position. Urban Growth New South Wales is an organisation that can help deliver that. But every council has got to have a play its part. And I think if there's one policy vacuum, it's that. So that'd been my first point. I think the second point is about, and picking up Catherine's point about, placemaking is everything. I think that one of the things that we really identified overseas, and we see it here in Australia too, is that public domain, and as the Lord Mayor said, John Chedid said that the public domain is often a driver of economic development. And if you can get in there and start with something in the public domain, then the private sector will come in and follow you. A lot of the reasons that a private development doesn't occur is not because you haven't zoned it enough or you haven't done a master plan. Those things don't matter. At the end of the day, the private sector only develops stuff when there's an economic incentive to do so. And if there's fundamentally insufficient land value to make it worth their while, they simply won't do it, no matter how much you've upzoned it. So getting in there and doing some fundamental improvements like the public domain changes the economic land value, changes the equation, and therefore changes the incentive for the private sector to come in and get involved. And they're my 2 points. Thank you, Ed.
All right, speaking of money, we have the money guys over at that table. Les, you start because you won on the trip. What can business get from this, and what should business give to it?
Well, what can business get in general?
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't thought of that question. Look, what I learned, in particular with the US, is it's got a very different government culture. The culture is very much a can-do culture. And I was actually quite blown away when we met the mayor of Denver, Colorado. And I think Denver politically would be the political equivalent of Byron Bay. So you're about as left-wing of the Democratic Party as you can get. And the mayor stood up and he was talking about all of these social outcomes he wanted to achieve for his city. And then he said, you know what? For the property guys, our property developers, they need to make a profit. And you know what? That's okay. I'm cool with that. And I was amazed because that is not the culture of the public service or of our politicians of certain political persuasions in this state. And what made me realise is that it actually requires government to change its culture, and it needs to be willing to engage more with the business sector, not less. So at the moment, at least in my experience when dealing with councils, is it is extremely adversarial. So you put forward a development application and you're in battle mode straight away. Whereas what really should happen, it should be a collaborative approach. At the strategic planning level, the councils should be speaking to the business community, finding out what is actually economically worthwhile, what is actually going to happen. I mean, one of the quotes that we heard on the trip, which I found amazing, was from that particular professor at Denver. I've forgotten his name. And he was saying, to plan is human, to implement is divine. Now, in New South Wales, for the last 30 years, we've just been planning. We have spent 30 years
By the way, he's
planning.
coming out here.
Fantastic. But what about the implementation of those plans? I mean, we have a metropolitan strategy. Where were the economic studies, the development feasibilities behind that study? I haven't seen them. I've read the document. It's extraordinary. In the US, that just wouldn't happen. So I think there's a big cultural shift that needs to happen in this state. And it applies at the government level. It means that the business community needs to be even more engaged than it currently is. And I'm willing to be engaged. I'm an activist. But it requires more business people to do the same thing.
Good. Thank you. Anyone from government want to say anything? Planning New South Wales, urban growth, any of you?
Thank you very much. Jill Reach from the Department of Planning. I actually sat in on the earlier sessions that you had before you went on the trip, one Saturday up in Newtown. And it's just extraordinary to see how this is actually developed, and from the sort of very rough sketches that people had on bits of paper to how this has actually come out to, some really tangible plans that, are now ready to be delivered, and actually hearing about the actions that you're going to take to deliver them. And I've actually been scribbling masses of notes as I've been sitting listening to you, thinking about how this actually is really enabling the new planning system and seeing it in action, and, how can we take what's in this room and actually, broaden the understanding and the knowledge and the experience that you've had from this exercise. And the other thing that you've all talked about is now the challenge of getting communities on board and getting communities engaged in this process. And we've had two really pleasing experiences with community engagement around strategic planning. We've run two deliberative forums, one up in Orange and one in Penrith. And they were a huge risk for us. We didn't know how they were going to turn out, but we just let the process run and just sort of, with a no attachment to the outcome. And in the Orange Forum, the community just were so enthusiastic to actually have the opportunity to have a voice in shaping outcomes for their local area, for where they live, for where they work, where they play. It was just, an overwhelming endorsement of the approach to strategic planning, and a willingness to give up on some of the development controls at the back end to achieve that. And likewise, when we had the forum in Penrith, which actually involved people from Central Coast, Mosman, out west, and, it took a bit longer to sort of level set people, but again, the same outcome, and, an overwhelming endorsement from people on the sort of approach that you're talking about around strategic planning, for your area. So, my mind is just whirring about how we can actually take this and broaden it. And, I'm working with Robin from PEER about an education program, and, the comment, I can't remember who made it, about how we actually take this as an education program. So how can we sort of package this up as part of that education program that we're going to be rolling out? You've talked about mindset change and culture change. Again, with PEER, we're kicking off the Culture Change Working Group in the next couple of weeks. I think, we're going to have to invite you to be part of that group, to sort of, because the sort of things that you're talking about in terms of the mindset approach are exactly the sort of things that we are thinking of. So, having received another letter from the Better Planning Network last night, you know, this is just, you know, so refreshing, and you know, it sort of makes me feel like we, you know, need to carry on.
You're on the right track.
Yeah,
You're definitely
exactly.
on the right track.
Yeah.
I want to thank all of you. Oh, Sally, do you want to say something?
Thank you very much for inviting me to be here today, and I wish I'd gone on the trip with you. You've been to some of my favourite cities, and everything you said, it's amazing to hear the backstory, because when you're a visitor you don't see it all, but to hear you talk about it, I was like, yeah, that's what happened. Yeah, I can see that now. I think the notion of a sense of place and what place means to people is universal, and I think it should transcend all levels of government, and it goes from what it means to be connected to the street outside, but then the suburb, and then, as you say, into work, and then home again, and the country. And it is about, and I also think that our citizens, and this is across all spheres of government, they're hoping that we're working on a sense of place for them, and they'd like to trust us to think that we're developing a place that's sustainable, that they can live and work and make money. I'm a public servant, I like making money too. And that their children can have jobs, but their children's lifestyle isn't limited by the choices we're making today. So I think the planning system has a real potential to do that, and the early engagement and discussions up front will be interesting, and how we actually get the community talking big picture and little picture all at the same time, and build that trust to get on with it will be interesting. So yeah, thank you again. It's been fascinating being here.
One of the things I noted, and this is one of the issues, I've talked to a number of councillors at the various cities I'm working with, they don't know the language. So they're frightened about changing from the LEP, etc., to this new language that guys like you are using. And the truth of the matter is, having been a professor of planning here, many of our professors don't know the language. So they're teaching students how to check the boxes rather than how to envision, how to strategize. We brought Rod in at the University of Sydney, where he's talking about strategic design. Not design for design's sake, but strategic design, where the design alters the character of the place with the people. So a lot of mindsets have to be changed. One thing that won't be changed is the bewitching hour for this room. I want to again thank Harriet. Harriet is a senior at the university, and so she will be moving on someplace. She has a great public policy background, so those of you looking for policy analysts. She has Vita. We're hoping to capture her at the United Nations if we can, but in the interim, that is a slower process than even a planning application in Wallara. The old planning application in Wallara, the old one. But you know, having someone of this caliber on my side has been really, really terrific. And, of course, Sandy started out at 100, so where'd he go? We have a great team. We want to continue to work with all of you. We're not going to expand this group. We just don't have the resources. We want to bring international speakers. We want to bring Peter Park over here. We want to bring some others. I forget the guy in Pasadena. We want to bring him over here to talk about really, he was developing houses that look like individual homes, but they're multifamily. You know, located right next to the train stop and so forth. He had a family that moved out after they had children. They moved back in from a single family house because the experience was so good in the multifamily dwelling in the program. And when you're developing community, that's what works. And that's what he's been able to achieve. So, what is it, from New York. Ethan Kent. We're going to bring Ethan Kent back out. We're going to bring several other people back out. Next year, the plan is to go to metropolitan New York, and I've already started talking with them. So if you want to go again, it'll be a very different set of cities, but many of the same kinds of issues, and cities had a different kind of struggle as older cities trying to reform their bureaucracies, their context, and the like. The best way to be a good professor is to learn from your students. Because if you can learn from and with your students, you will always be in front. So I want to thank you for keeping me in front. Good afternoon.